Okay. Testing. 1, 2, and 3. Alright, so you may be questioning, Mark, what in the world are you talking about? Part 1 of part 4. Like, come on, just get to the point. Now, with all due respect, I was unprepared for this. Because I had it written down that for parts 4 and 5, I just go clean through the Old Testament, with part 4 going from Moses to David, and then part 5 going from David all the way up to Malachi. Now, what I did not kind of expect was the fact that, there's a lot, there's like a whole chunk of books. I really thought I could go through 38 entire books in the span of 2 hours. No, my brothers, no, I cannot. I'm just gonna say that right here, right now. No, that was a dumb idea. I don't know what I was thinking. So today we're strictly going to cover Moses in part 1, and then we're going to go on part 2 of part 4. It's going to be from Joshua all the way to King David. So there's still that large jump, but it's not as large as a jump as it would have been before. So let us begin. By the way, this is a kind of a breaking of that whole, this is a 7-part series. Technically, I'm not lying, just that parts 4 and 5 are split into 2 parts. Okay, I'm just trying to find an excuse that to keep up the promise. But yeah, let's get into reading the Bible, shall we? Alright, so 349 years after Israel's entrance to Egypt, a new pharaoh came that knew nothing about Joseph or his accomplishments. Israel's family of 70 has become a family of nearly 2 million. The pharaoh fears that this family of nomads will attempt to take over Egypt. Exodus chapter 1, verses 5 through 22. At that time, Jacob had 70 children and grandchildren. All of them came to Egypt, except for Joseph. He was already there. Joseph died, and so did all of his brothers. It was not long before that entire generation was gone. But the people of Israel were prolific. They had children easily, and their numbers increased rapidly. As their numbers grew, so did their strength. Eventually, they filled the land. One day, a new king came to power and ruled over Egypt. But this king had no knowledge of Joseph. He said to some of his advisors, "Look, there are more Israelites than ever before, and they are growing more powerful than we are. We need to be careful in our dealings with them, otherwise they may grow even greater in number, and in a time of war join forces with our enemies, fight against us, and then leave the land." So the Egyptian authorities enslaved the Israelites and appointed cruel slave drivers over them to oppress them with hard, back-breaking labor. They forced them to build the storage cities of Pithom and Ramesses for the pharaoh. But the harder the slave drivers pushed the Israelites, the more rapidly they had children and spread throughout the land. Because of this, the Egyptians grew to detest the Hebrew Israelites. The Hebrew Israelites, that's a sentence. The Egyptians grew to detest the Israelites even more and violently forced them to work until they were sore and tired, far beyond exhaustion. The Egyptians made life bitter for all those Israelites, forced to mix mortar, make bricks, and do all types of grueling work in the fields. They tormented their Israelite slaves until all the work was done. Pharaoh, Egypt's king, called for some of the Hebrew midwives. Their names were Shiphrah and Puah. "Listen closely. Whenever you are looking after a Hebrew woman who is in labor and ready to deliver, if she gives birth to a son, then kill the baby. If it is a daughter, then allow her to live." But the midwives respected God more than they feared Pharaoh, so they did not carry out the king's command. Instead, they let all the boys live. When Egypt's king heard this news, he sent for the midwives. Why have you disobeyed my orders and allowed the boys to live? The midwife said to him, Because unlike Egyptian women, Hebrew women are hardy and energetic, and they give birth before the midwife arrives to help. God was good to the midwives, and under their care the Israelite women had many more children. Despite the Pharaoh's orders, the people of Israel became stronger and more powerful. Because the midwives respected God, he blessed them with families of their own. In response to the rapid growth in the Hebrew population, Pharaoh issued a command to his people. Every boy who is born to the Hebrews must be thrown into the Nile, and every girl is to be left alive. While the Pharaoh is plotting to disrupt I hate my speech impediment. I'm a Moses. I am a Moses. That's a reference you'll get later on in this video. While the Pharaoh is plotting the destruction of all the male Jewish children, a baby boy is born that will change the course of Jewish history forever. Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. One day a man and woman, both from the tribe of Levi, married. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. Now, I know I should be continuing to read on the verse, but I'm just going to leave this here. This dude from the tribe of Levi, he married his aunt. It is disgusting, but then again, it is the ancient times before the law, so I don't think I can judge them too hard. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that her son was healthy and beautiful, she feared for his safety. So she kept him hidden from view for 3 whole months. When she could no longer keep him hidden away, she took a basket made of reeds, sealed it with tar and pitch, and placed her baby boy in it. Then she wedged the basket among the reeds along the edge of the Nile River. The Hebrew word, by the way, here's a little side note. The Hebrew word for the basket that Moses' mother prepared is the word used in Genesis for the ark that preserves Noah and his family from the flood. So here we have this parallel between the ark that preserved Noah from watery judgment for a greater purpose, and now we have this basket that protects Moses' life from the Nile. So he may have a greater purpose, just like Noah did. All the while, the child's sister watched from a distance to see what might happen to her baby brother. Later on, Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river while her young attendants walked along the bank nearby. Pharaoh's daughter noticed the basket wedged among the reeds and wondered what it might contain. So she instructed her maid to bring it to her. When Pharaoh's daughter opened the basket, she found the baby boy. He was crying, and her heart melted with compassion. This is a Hebrew child. The child's sister came out of her hiding place and said, "Would you like me to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said, "All right, go find a nurse." So the baby's sister went and fetched his mother. The boy's mother approached Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter said, "Here, take this child and nurse him for me, and I will pay you for your services." So the woman took the child, who was secretly her own son, and nursed him just as Pharaoh's daughter had instructed. The boy grew, and when the time was right, the woman brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she adopted him as her own. She named him Moses because, as she explained, "I took him out of the water." Moses was drawn out of the water by the Pharaoh's daughter, and he was raised among the Pharaoh's children. When Moses was of 40 years of age, he came to his people, who were working in Goshen. Now, here we're going to get to an interesting book, which is actually not in the Bible, but does write of it. Now, this is really confusing because, why would I talk about a book that isn't in the Bible at all? Well, there is one verse, or a couple of verses specifically, that mention this. In the book of Joshua, chapter 10, verse 13, it says, And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is not this written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day. So here, in the book of Joshua, there's a reference to this mysterious book of Jasher. And this is an apocryphal book that is in the books of Joshua and 2 Samuel. Now, I'm going to be reading a version of this that is translated directly from the original Hebrew into English. This is a translation that was translated from a print from 1613. The Hebrew word of this means the book of the upright, or the book of the upright, or the correct record. So Jasher was a name given to this book. So we're going to be reading from chapter 70 of the book of Jasher, verse 40, to chapter 71, verse 16. I got to scroll to the bottom. Give me a couple seconds. All right, there we go. And Moses was in the king's house, going in and coming out. And the Lord gave him favor in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all his servants, and in the eyes of all the people of Egypt. And they loved Moses exceedingly. And the day arrived when Moses went to Goshen to see his brethren, that he saw the children of Israel in their burdens and hard labor. And Moses was grieved on their account. And Moses returned to Egypt, and came to the house of Pharaoh, and came before the king, and Moses bowed down before the king. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, I pray thee, my lord, I have come to seek a small request from thee. Turn not away my face empty. And Pharaoh said unto him, Speak. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, Let there be given unto thy servants, the children of Israel who are in Goshen, one day to rest therein from their labor. And the king answered Moses and said, Behold, I have lifted up thy face in this thing to grant thy request. And Pharaoh ordered a proclamation to be issued throughout Egypt and Goshen, saying, To you, all the children of Israel, thus says the king, For 6 days you shall do your work and labor, but on the 7th day you shall rest, and you shall not perform any work. Thus you shall do thus shall you do all the days, as the king and Moses the son of Baphia have commanded. And Moses rejoiced at this thing which the king had granted him, and all the children of Israel did as Moses ordered them. For this thing was from the Lord to the children of Israel. For the Lord had begun to remember the children of Israel, to save them for the sake of their fathers. And the Lord was with Moses, and his fame went throughout Egypt. And Moses became great in the eyes of all the Egyptians, and in the eyes of all the children of Israel, seeking good for his people Israel, and speaking words of peace regarding them to the king. And Moses desired to see his father and his mother, and he went to them in Goshen. And when Moses had come near Goshen, he came to the place where the children of Israel were engaged in work. And he observed their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian smiting one of his Hebrew brethren. And when the man who was beaten saw Moses, he ran to him for help. For the man Moses was greatly respected in the house of the Pharaoh. And he said to him, My lord, attend to me. This Egyptian came to my house in the night, bound me, and came to my wife in my presence. And now he seeks to take my life away. And when Moses heard this wicked thing, his anger was kindled against the Egyptian. And he turned this way and the other. And when he saw there was no man there, he smote the Egyptian and hid him in the sand, and delivered the Hebrew from the hand of him that smote him. And the Hebrew went to his house, and Moses returned to his home, and went forth and came back to the king's house. And when the man had returned home, he thought of repudiating his wife. For it was not right in the house of Jacob for any man to come to his wife after she had been defiled. And the woman went and told her brothers, and the woman's brothers sought to slay him. And he fled to his house and escaped. And on the 2nd day Moses went forth to his brethren, and saw, behold, 2 men were quarreling. And he said to the wicked one, Why dost thou smite thy neighbor? And he answered him, and said to him, Who has set thee for a prince and judge over us? Dost thou think to slay me as thou didst slay the Egyptian? And Moses was afraid, and he said, "Surely the thing is known?" And Pharaoh heard of this affair, and he ordered Moses to be slain. So God sent his angel, and he appeared unto Pharaoh in the likeness of a captain of the guard. And the angel of the Lord took the sword from the hand of the captain of the guard, and took his head off with it. For the likeness of the captain of the guard was turned into the likeness of Moses. And the angel of the Lord took hold of the right hand of Moses, and brought him forth from Egypt, and placed him from without the borders of Egypt, a distance of 40 days' journey. And Aaron his brother alone remained in the land of Egypt, and he prophesied to the children of Israel, saying, "Thus says the Lord, God of your ancestors, throw away each man the abominations of his eyes, and do not defile yourselves with the idols of Egypt." And the children of Israel rebelled, and would not hearken to Aaron at that time. And the Lord thought to destroy them, were it not that the Lord remembered the covenant which he had made with Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. In those days the hand of Pharaoh continued to be severe against the children of Israel, and he crushed and oppressed them until the time when God sent forth his word and took notice of them. So, yeah, it's a pretty bad situation for the Jews, to say the minimum, to say the absolute minimum. So, Moses is now a runaway murderer. Moses is led to the deserts of Midian, where he would spend the next 40 years there, working as a shepherd. Life was good for Moses. He had found father, sisters-in-law, a wife, and 2 sons. But the Israelites were still captive under the command of a new Pharaoh, after Pharaoh. They groan and cry out to God, and he listens. God leads Moses and his flock to the rocks of Horeb, and there Moses is greeted with a strange sight. Now Moses was tending to the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led... Hold on, am I reading? Oh, no, I'm reading the wrong version. I'm sorry. I have a version I use that is a simplified version of the King James Version. Here we go. Now one day when Moses was shepherding the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, he guided the flock far away from its usual pastures to the other side of the desert, and came to a place known as Horeb, where the mountain of God stood. There, the special messenger of God appeared to Moses in a fiery blaze from within the bush. Moses looked again at the bush as it blazed, but to his amazement, the bush did not burn up in flames. Moses said to himself, "Why is this bush not burning up? I need to move a little closer to get a better look at this amazing sight." When God saw Moses approaching the bush to observe it more closely, he called out to him from within the bush, "Moses, Moses!" "I'm right here." "Don't come any closer. Take off your sandals and stand barefoot on the ground in my presence, for this ground is holy ground. I am the true God, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." A feeling of dread and awe rushed over Moses. He hid his face because he was afraid he might catch a glimpse of the true God. "I have seen how my people in Egypt are being mistreated. I have heard their groaning when the slave drivers torment and harass them, for I know well their suffering. I have come to rescue them from the oppression of the Egyptians, to lead them from that land where they are slaves, and to give them a good land, a wide open space flowing with milk and honey. The land is currently inhabited by the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. The plea of Israel's children has come before me, and I have observed the cruel treatment they have suffered by Egyptian hands. So go. I am sending you back to Egypt as my messenger to the Pharaoh. I want you to gather my people, the children of Israel, and bring them out of Egypt." Moses said to God, "Who am I to confront Pharaoh and lead Israel's children out of Egypt?" "Do not fear, Moses. I will be with you every step of the way, and this will be a sign to you that I am the one who has sent you. After you have led them out of Egypt, you will return to this mountain and worship me." Moses said, "Let's say I go to Israel and tell them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to rescue you,' and then they will reply, 'What is this name?' What should I tell them?" "I
am who I am. This is what you should tell the people of Israel. I am has sent me to rescue you. This is what you are to tell Israel's people. The God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Israel is the one who has sent me to you. This is my name forevermore.
Excuse me.
And this is the name by which all future generations shall remember me. Round up all the elders in Israel and tell them, the God of your fathers and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has revealed himself to me and said, I have been watching over you, and I am deeply troubled by what has been done to you in Egypt. So I will rescue you from the oppression you have suffered in Egypt, and lead you to the land of Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a rich and productive land flowing with milk and honey. They will listen to all you tell them. You and the elders will then go to visit the Egypt's king, and tell the king, the Hebrews' God has appeared to us. We ask that you allow us to travel 3 days' distance into the desert to offer sacrifices to God. But I already know that Egypt's king will turn down your request. He will not allow you to go unless he is compelled by a hand stronger than his own. So I will stretch out my hand, display my power, and crush Egypt with a series of miracles I will perform. After that, the king will send you out of Egypt. I will make it so that the Egyptians treat my people favorably. And when you leave Egypt, you will not leave empty-handed. Every Hebrew woman will ask her Egyptian neighbor and any foreigner in her home for anything made of silver, gold, or even fine clothing. You will give all the items you collect to your children to wear. In this way, you will strip these items from the Egyptians.
What if they don't trust me? What if they don't listen to a single word I say? They are more likely to reply, the Eternal One has not revealed himself to you. God answered Moses,
What do you have in your hand?
My shepherd's staff.
Throw your staff on the ground.
Now, a little side note here. God has been called by many names and many titles, and those reflect to some extent aspects of God's nature and character. In this encounter, God reveals to Moses his name. This is a special name by which God invites his covenant partners to know and call him for all time. It sometimes appears in books or translations as YHWH or Yahweh, but this is only a transliteration of the 4 letters in Hebrew. It's not a translation of its meaning. The name is built on the Hebrew verb to be, and refers to the fact that God is the self-existent one.
I am who I am.
Many translations render the divine name Lord in capital and small capital letters, but this translation, the translation that I'm using, uses the Eternal One. For at the heart of his name is the notion that God has always been and always will be. God transcends time and existence. He is the ground of existence. John later uses the word theos, which typically means a command or word, and it was used a lot in, I believe, in Greek culture to represent the soul of the universe. So clearly this is a riff back to Genesis 1, but also here in Exodus 3 and 4, where God reveals his true name to Moses. Out of respect, the ancients would seldom speak or write the covenant name. They would use it only on the most solemn occasions. Still, God is establishing a unique relationship with Abraham's descendants, and it is time to reveal them his name. So Moses threw the staff on the ground, and it was transformed into a snake. Moses quickly jumped back in fear.
Reach out and grab it by the tail.
Despite his natural fears, Moses reached out and grabbed the snake, and as he held it, it changed back into a shepherd's staff.
This sign is so that the people will believe that I, the God of their fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, have revealed himself to you. Now for the second sign. Put your hand on your chest inside your shirt.
Moses did as the Eternal One instructed, and when he pulled his hand out, His hand was covered in some disease that made it look as white as snow. This would go on to be known as leprosy.
"Put your hand back inside your clothes."
Moses again did as he was instructed. And when he removed his hand from his shirt, it turned to normal like the rest of his skin.
"If they refuse to believe you and are not persuaded after you perform the first sign, perhaps they will be after the second sign. But if they refuse to believe you and are not persuaded after you perform the first two signs, then here is the third sign. Take some water from the Nile and pour it out onto the ground. The water you take from the Nile will become blood on the ground."
Moses said, "Please, Lord, I am not a talented speaker." Relatable. I have never been good with words. I wasn't when I was younger, and I haven't gotten any better since you revealed yourself to me. I stutter and stammer, and my words get all twisted.
"Who is it that gives a person a mouth? Who determines whether one person speaks and another doesn't? Why is it that one person hears and another doesn't? And why can one person see and another doesn't? Isn't it because of me, the Eternal? You know it is. Go now, and I will be there and give you the words to speak. I will tell you what to say."
But Moses, he kept on begging and begging and begging for someone else. "Please, Lord, I beg you to send your message to someone else, anyone else." But then God became angry with Moses. I'm not kidding. That's literally what the verse says.
"How about your brother, Aaron the Levite? I know he speaks eloquently. And look, he is already on his way to meet you. When he sees you, his heart will be delighted. I want you to talk to him and put the right words in his mouth. And I will guide your mouth and his mouth and instruct you both on what you should do. He will address the people as your spokesman, and he will serve as your mouth. And you will instruct him in what he is to say, as if you were God to him. Take this staff in your hand and use it to perform the signs I have shown you."
Now, despite Moses' doubts, he has no choice but to follow the command of God. I mean, I would too. I mean, if God was yelling at me, legitimately angry, reminder, this is, the God that isn't, well, that's debatable. But reminder that, this is, God. I can't say no to God if he's yelling down my throat to just do what he wants me to do. So, you don't have much of another choice. So, he leaves with his wife and 2 sons to go to the land of Egypt. Now, on the way to Egypt, Moses finds a peculiar person. If I could get to the verse. Thank you. Now, God said to Aaron,
"Go into the wilderness and meet Moses."
So Aaron journeyed to meet Moses, and they met at the mountain of God. When he saw his brother, he kissed him. During their joyful reunion, Moses told Aaron everything that the Eternal had sent him to do. And he explained the miraculous signs he, being God, he had instructed him to perform. So, Moses, now reunited with his brother Aaron, returned to the land of Egypt and confront the head of power, the Pharaoh. All right, time to get to Exodus 5. Exodus 5, chapters 1, all the way, Exodus chapter 5, verse 1, all the way to chapter 6, verse 12, and from there, verse 28 to chapter 7, verse 7. Yeesh, this is a long one. Not so long after, Moses and Aaron confronted Pharaoh. "The Eternal, Israel's God, has a message for you. Release my people, so that they may go and celebrate a feast in my honor in the desert." "And who is this God you call the Eternal One, that I should heed his message and release his people Israel? I do not know any God by that name, and furthermore, I do not intend to release Israel. The God of the Hebrews has visited us. We ask that you allow us to travel 3 days' distance into the desert to sacrifice to the Eternal, our God. Otherwise, he may become angry and come after us with disease or sword."
Moses and Aaron, why are you distracting people from their work? Stop wasting time and get back to your labor. Look, there are vast numbers of people in this land who should be working. Instead, they are all idle because of you." That same day, Pharaoh gave instructions to the slave drivers who were over the people and their suppressors. "Don't supply the people with any more straw to make bricks as you have been doing. Let them go out and find their own straw. But I still want you to expect the same number of bricks from them as before. Even though the task will be harder, do not lessen their load. They are lazy and are asking for time off, saying, 'Release us so that we can go sacrifice to our God in the desert and feast in his honor.' Therefore, make the work so heavy that the men don't have energy to do anything but work. Perhaps then they won't be distracted by these lies." The slave drivers and supervisors said to the people, "Pharaoh has a message for you. I am not going to supply you with any more straw. You must go out and get it yourselves, wherever you can find it. But you must produce the same number of bricks as before. Your workload will not be reduced." The people quickly and desperately spread out across the land of Egypt, looking for dry stalks of grain to use for straw. The slave drivers punished them hard. "Hurry! You must meet your quotas. You must produce the same number of bricks as you did before when we provided you with straw." Plus, they beat and interrogated the supervisors of the Israelites, the Hebrews whom the slave drivers had appointed over the workers. "Slave drivers, why are you lagging behind? Why haven't you met your quotas of bricks yesterday or today as you did before?" The supervisors of the Israelites were unable to meet the demands, and so they appealed to Pharaoh. The supervisors pleaded with the Pharaoh, "Why are you treating your servants this way? No more straw is being provided to your servants if the slave drivers keep yelling at us, 'Make bricks!' And then your servants are beaten. It is your people who are at fault here, not us." Pharaoh says, "No, it is you. You are lazy. You are all lazy. You try to escape your work by making up excuses, saying, 'Please release us so that we may go sacrifice to the Eternal.' Leave me now and get back to work, you indolent whiners. You will not be provided any straw, and you must make bricks the same number. You must make the same number of bricks as before." The supervisors of the Israelites knew they were in deep trouble, and when they were told, "You are not to lessen the workload, you must still make the same number of bricks every day as you did before." After the supervisors left Pharaoh, they went directly to Moses and Aaron, who were already waiting for them. They said to him, "May the Eternal see and judge what you have done. Now, because of you, Pharaoh and all who serve him look on us as if we are some kind of disgusting odor. You might as well have put the sword in their hands they will use to kill us." And Moses went back to meet with God, and he said, "God, these are your people. Why have you brought so much trouble on them? Why have you sent me here? Ever since I approached Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done more harm to them than ever before. And you have done absolutely nothing to rescue your people." And then God speaks to Moses. "Now you will see..." Oh, hold on. Sorry. I forgot. I have to shove this microphone down my throat every time I want to voice God. "Now you will see what I have in store for Pharaoh. When Pharaoh sees the power of my hand, he will not only send my people from this land, he will drive them out. I am the Eternal. I revealed myself to Abraham, Isaac, and Israel as God all-powerful." That is El Shaddai. "But I did not reveal my name, Yahweh, the Eternal One, to them. I also made my covenant with them. I promised I would give them Canaan, the land where their ancestors lived as strangers. In addition, I have heard the constant cries of the Israelites who have been enslaved by the Egyptians. I have remembered my covenant. Go now and tell the people of Israel, I am who I am, the Eternal, and I will rescue you from the heavy load the Egyptians have laid on you. I will liberate you from their oppression. I will stretch out my powerful arm and free you with amazing acts of judgment. Then I will gather you to me as my people, and I will be your God. You will know that I am the Eternal, who rescued you from the heavy load the Egyptians have put on you. I will lead you into Canaan, the very land I promised Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. I will give to you as a possession, for I am who I am.
So Moses went and told these things to the Israelites, but they turned a deaf ear to him because they were in such low spirits and exhausted from their harsh labor. And the Eternal One once again instructed Moses,
Go speak with the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and tell him to release the Israelites from his land.
And Moses said, but the Israelites haven't paid attention to anything I've said. How do you expect Pharaoh to listen to me if my own people won't? I am not fit to speak for you. One day, sorry, I'm reading the wrong verse. These are the same Aaron and Moses whom the Eternal directed, lead the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt like a victorious army. These two brothers spoke to Pharaoh, Egypt's king, about releasing the Israelites. One day the Eternal One visited Moses in Egypt and said to him,
I am the Eternal. Go tell Pharaoh, the Egyptian's king, everything that I tell you.
Moses said, please, I am not fit to speak for you. How do you expect Pharaoh to listen to me? And God said to Moses,
Look! I have made it so that Pharaoh will deal with you as a god and your brother Aaron as your prophet. I want you to tell Aaron everything I command you. Then your brother Aaron will tell Pharaoh to release my people Israel from his land. But I am going to harden Pharaoh's stubborn heart so that I can perform sign after sign, wonder after wonder in the land of Egypt. Still, Pharaoh will ignore the message you give him. Then I will unleash the power of my hand against Egypt and liberate my vast armies, my people, the children of Israel, from Egypt with amazing acts of judgment. When I stretch out my hand against Egypt and free the children of Israel from their oppressive gaps, the Egyptians will have no doubt that I am the Eternal.
Moses and Aaron did exactly what the Eternal commanded. When they confronted Pharaoh, Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83. Now, I'd like to talk about how absurd this would actually be. Like, imagine just these two ancient old men walking up to you, looking you dead in the eyes, said,
Hey, our God spoke to us to liberate our people from captivity.
You'd think they were crazy. But after a couple signs, you'd be convinced. Exodus chapter 7, verse 9, all the way up to 13. The Eternal then continued his instructions to Moses and Aaron.
When Pharaoh says, do something wondrous to prove yourselves, then Moses, tell Aaron, take your staff and toss it at Pharaoh's feet, and it will be transformed into a snake.
So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did exactly what the Eternal told them to. Aaron threw his staff down before Pharaoh and his servants, and it was transformed into a snake. Pharaoh then sent for all the sages and sorcerers and the most talented magicians in Egypt and stepped up and performed the same act with their own incantations. Each magician threw down his staff, and each staff turned into a snake. But Aaron's staff devoured all of the other staffs, and still Pharaoh's heart was as hard as stone. He did not pay attention to anything Moses and Aaron said, just as God had predicted. Moses and Aaron failed in convincing the Pharaoh to let their people go. So, God released awful tragedies and plagues on the Egyptians. First, all the water systems were turned to blood. Second, an abundance of frogs came upon the Egyptians. Third and fourth, lice came up from the ground, and flies came from the heavens to pester the Egyptians. Fifth, all the livestock and cattle that belonged to the Egyptians died. Sixth, boils grew on the Egyptians. Seven, hail the size of rocks rained from the heavens alongside lightning. And when they burned up anything, when they struck anything, that would burn up. Eighth, a wind brought forth locusts that would fill the Egyptians' houses and destroy their fields. Ninth, a thick darkness that could be felt reigned over Egypt for 3 days. But after each plague, the Pharaoh denied to release the Jews from captivity. And so, just as Moses and Aaron warned the Pharaoh in their first interaction, God sent a plague against the firstborn. Exodus 11, verses 1 through 10. And God said to Moses,
I am going to strike Pharaoh and his Egypt one more time. And after this final plague, Pharaoh will release you from Egypt. When he finally releases you, he will be so glad to see you go that he will practically force you out of his land. Go now and speak to all the people. Have every man and every woman ask their neighbors to give them items made of silver and gold.
Now the Eternal caused the Egyptian people to have a favorable attitude towards his people. And Moses was already highly regarded in the land of Egypt by Pharaoh's servants and most Egyptians. Moses said to the Pharaoh,
This is the message of the Eternal. About midnight I will move through Egypt, and every firstborn son and every family in Egypt will die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, who rules from his throne, to the firstborn of the slave girl who grinds at the mill. The firstborn of all your cattle and livestock will die as well. The air will be heavy with loud wailing throughout the land of Egypt, a deep and dismal mourning unlike any that has been or will ever be again in the land. But among the people of Israel, not even a dog's bark will disturb the night. Then you will know that the Eternal makes a sharp distinction between Egypt and Israel. All those who are servants to you, Pharaoh, will come down to me and humbly bow before me and beg, Please go, you and all those who follow you, leave now. That is when I will go. Then Moses, who was boiling with anger, left Pharaoh's presence. Pharaoh will not pay attention to what you say. As a result, my wonders will increase in all the land of Egypt.
Moses and Aaron performed all these wonders in the presence of Pharaoh, but the Eternal hardened Pharaoh's stubborn heart, and Pharaoh refused to release the Israelites from his land. So, God is ready to punish the Egyptians with the loss of the firstborn. But of course, the Jewish people weren't affected. So, how would there be a way that God could just save the Jews from the punishment that was coming? Well, this is how he did it. God spoke to Moses and Aaron,
Mark this month as the first month of all months for you, the first month of your year. Declare this message to the entire community of Israel. When the 10th day of this month arrives, every family is to select a land, each one for each household. One for each household, my apologies. If there aren't enough people in the family to eat an entire lamb, then they should share a lamb with their nearest neighbor according to how people are in the neighbor's family. Due to how many people are in the people's family. Divide the portions of the lamb so that each person has enough to eat. Choose a 1-year-old male that is intact and free of blemishes, and you can take it from the sheep or the goats. Keep this chosen lamb safe until the 14th day of the month. Then the entire community of Israel will slaughter their lambs together at twilight. They are to take some of its blood and smear it across the top and down the 2 sides of the doorframe of the houses where they plan to eat.
the Jewish people were to sacrifice a young lamb that had no imperfections and paint the lamb's blood on their wooden doorposts. If they did this correctly, the angel of death would pass over their houses and their firstborns would be saved from death. Little did the Jews know that the symbol of Passover was pointing towards a future event in which the Messiah, a redeemer of the Jews anointed by God himself, would live a perfect life without any sin or without any sin or wrongdoing, and that he would die and have his blood shed on a wooden stake, so that the punishment of sin and death could pass over all of us today. You and your descendants. All right, here we go. You and your descendants are obligated to keep these instructions for all time. Even after you arrive in the land the Eternal has promised you, the land flowing with milk and honey, you must keep these instructions and perform this ritual. When your children ask you, what does this ritual mean to you? You will answer them, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Eternal, for he passed over the houses of the Israelites when we were slaves in Egypt. And although he struck the Egyptians, he spared our lives and our houses. When Moses finished the instructions, the people bowed down and worshipped. The Israelites went and did as they were instructed. They were obedient to what God had commanded Moses and Aaron. And now this is what happened. At midnight, he struck down all the firstborn sons in Egypt, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh, who sat on his throne, to the firstborn son of the prisoners locked in the dungeon, and even the firstborn of all livestock in the land. Moses woke up during the night. Pharaoh woke up during the night. He wasn't the only one. His servants, as well as all the Egyptians in the land, had awoken. A great scream shattered the night in Egypt, for there was not one single Egyptian house where someone was not dead. Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron before the night was over. "Get up and get out! Leave my people right now, you and all the rest of the Israelites! Go and worship this God of yours, the eternal God, as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds as well with you, just as you said, and go. But bless me on your way out." The Egyptians frantically urged the people of Israel to hurry and leave their land, the Egyptians imploring, "If you do not leave soon, we will all be dead." So the Israelites hurried. They took their bread dough before any yeast had been added, packed up their kneading bowls, wrapped them in some of their clothing, and carried them on their shoulders. The people of Israel also did what Moses had told them to do. They asked the Egyptians for items made of silver and gold, and they asked for extra clothing as well. The Eternal caused the Egyptians to have a favorable attitude towards his people, so the Egyptians fulfilled these requests and gave the people what they asked for. This is how the Israelites stripped the Egyptians of their valued possessions. The Israelites left and traveled from Ramesses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men, plus all the women and children. Another crowd made up of various and sundry peoples accompanied them, as well as herds, flocks, and a great number of livestock. They baked flat bread along the way from the dough without yeast, which they carried with them from Egypt. The dough had no yeast because the people had been rushed out of Egypt, and they did not have enough time to gather food supplies for themselves. The Israelites had lived in the land of Egypt for a total of 430 years. On the last day of their 430th year, all the forces belonging to the Eternal left the land of Egypt. This was the night when the Eternal kept watch over his people and brought them safely out of the land of Egypt. Now this night is to be kept by his people, to be celebrated by all of the people of Israel throughout generations.
This is the requirement for Passover. No foreigner or outsider should eat this meal, but every slave bought with money may participate in the celebration if he has been initiated into the community by circumcision. No temporary residents or paid servants may share in it. The meal must be eaten in only one house. Don't take any of the meat outside. Not one of the lamb's bones shall be broken. The entire community of Israel must celebrate it. If you have outsiders living among you and they want to celebrate the Passover to the Eternal with them, then all the men must agree to be circumcised. Only after circumcision may they join and celebrate with you. Then you must treat them as if they were native born, but make sure no uncircumcised male eats any part of the sacred meal. The same instruction applies to everyone equally, without distinction, the native as well as the outsider who is living among you.
Then all of the Israelites did exactly as the Eternal had instructed Moses and Aaron to do. On that same day, he led the Israelites as they marched out of the land of Egypt like an army. Now, there's a really interesting line here about how none of his bones should be broken. And years later, 1,400 years later-ish, Jesus is hung on the cross alongside two other criminals. And while the two other criminals had their legs broken, Jesus was already dead, and there was no need to break his bones. And as the Gospel of John says in chapter 19, it happened this way to fulfill the Hebrew scriptures that not one of his bones shall be broken. Now, this is the part where I genuinely did not write, like I genuinely I didn't write anything. I didn't prepare, is the point I'm trying to make. But just because I'm not prepared doesn't mean I don't have anything in here. I have quite a lot of things stored in there. So we're going to cover the key points that will be important when we're going to be discussing the story of Jesus Christ. Now, the Israelites have been guided by God. Now, a lot of people make the argument that this couldn't be 2 million people going, I stutter enough when it's scripted. It gets even worse when it's unscripted. But, 15% battery. We got to speed run this. But the Jews, a lot of people make the argument that 2 million people, it's impossible for 2 million people to have enough resources naturally provided by them in the Sinai desert. But that's the point. God chose them out of all the nations to be his special people. And so he protected them and provided for them despite all the odds. He protected them from the wrath of Pharaoh's army. Pharaoh regretted his decision to let go of all his slaves, and so he went out to kill all the Hebrews, but God made a pathway through the sea of reeds for them, and they walked through, but when the Pharaoh and his army were fully halfway through the sea, the waters collapsed on them. God provided them with water. He brought them onto a small little lake. However, the water was sour and deadly. And so Moses, by the command of God, dropped a branch in the water, and it became sweet and healthy. God brought water out of a rock for the Jews when they needed more. And he brought bread from the heavens that tasted like honey called manna, which literally means, what is it? And quail would come in the evening. In the morning there was manna, and in the evening came the quail. And God constantly provided for his people. Why? Because God had a greater task for his people. And this task would be revealed in Exodus chapter 19. See, I know how to make a smooth transition. The Israelites entered the desert of Sinai on the day the third moon appeared after the Israelites left Egypt. After departing from Rephidim, they entered into the desert of Sinai and set up camp out in the desert. The entire community of Israel camped right in front of the mountain of God. Moses climbed the mountain to speak with God, and the Eternal spoke to him from the mountain.
This is what I want you to say to the house of Jacob, to all the people of Israel. You are eyewitnesses of all that I did to the Egyptians. You saw how I snatched you from the bonds of slavery and carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you hear my voice, obey what I say, and keep my covenant, then you, out of all the nations of the world, will be my treasured people. After all, the earth belongs to me. You will be my kingdom of priests, a nation holy and set apart. Tell the Israelites exactly what I have told you.
Now, this may sound a bit weird. What? A kingdom of priests? Is everyone just killing goats now and throwing babies in fires? No. That's illegal, both in their times and now. I think this is a good time to put a disclaimer to not do anything characters in the Bible do. They're not all great. Just gonna say that. But the point is that Adam and Eve were kind of priests for God, because a priest, according to God's definition of what a priest should be, is someone who is a representative of God to others. Adam and Eve were the original priests, a symbol of God being made directly in his image and in his likeness. And they were to share God's love and power of creation to other beings, the animals, because they were to tend to the animals and to the garden and to keep it and to continue multiplying and creating, and share and grow in that love of creating, just like how God loved creating. But then they fell short of God's glory, and God, as Moses mentions later in the book of Deuteronomy, split out the nations all over the earth to different spiritual powers, the demons. They were spread out to others, to the temptations of the flesh, lust, power, greed, etc. But God called out Israel not because they were the greatest or because they deserved it, but because they were the smallest of all the nations. And God called them because purely out of his love for them and because of the covenant he made with Abraham. And now they are called, just as God told Abraham, to be a blessing to the rest of the nations. What does that mean? They are called to be God's representative to the rest of the world. They are to love each other. They are to take care of each other. They are to be representatives of God to the rest of the world. And how are they going to do that? By following the laws that God is going to be giving them on this mount. Excuse me, hold on. My nose is killing me. Moses descended from the mountain and assembled the elders of Israel and told them everything the Eternal commanded him to say. And the Israelites all said,
"We will do everything the Eternal God has told us to do."
Moses took what the people said back to the Eternal. And God said to Moses,
"I will come to you in a thick cloud so that the people will be able to hear my voice when I speak to you. That way they will trust you forever."
Then Moses told the Eternal all that the people had said. And God says to Moses,
"Go down to the people and get them ready to meet me today and tomorrow by purifying themselves and washing their garments. For the third day they will need to be ready, for on that day I will descend from Mount Sinai so that everyone can see. You are to set up boundaries for all the people around the mountain and tell the people, be careful that you do not cross the boundaries and go up on the mountain or even touch the edge of it. If anyone so much as touches the mountain, he should be put to death. No one is to touch the person or animal who crosses the boundary, stone or shoot them with arrows, but do not touch them. It doesn't matter whether it's an animal or whether it's a human or an animal. It must be put to death." But when they hear the long blast of ram's horn, then they are permitted to make their... Oh, I'm still reading God's lines. I did not realize. "But when they hear the long blast of the ram's horn, then they are permitted to make their way up the mountain." Moses went down the mountain and purified all the people. They washed their clothes, and he gave instructions to everyone. "Be ready for the third day. Do not have sexual relations with your spouse between now and then." When the morning of the third day arrived, thunder cracked and lightning lit up the sky. A thick cloud veiled the mountain, and there was a long, loud blast of a ram's horn. Every person in the camp trembled. Moses led the ancient people away from the camp to encounter God. Everyone waited at the base of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was covered in a thick smoke because the Eternal descended on the mountain in fire. And the smoke of the fire rose up to the sky as if it were a billowing of a furnace. And the entire mountain shuddered and quaked intensely. The blast of the ram's horn grew louder and louder. Moses spoke, and God answered with a voice that rumbled like thunder. The Eternal descended to the summit of Mount Sinai. He called for Moses to come and meet him. So Moses began the long, hard climb to the mountain. To the top of the mountain, at least. "Go down and warn the people to not cross the boundaries in order to try to see me, or else many of them will die. Any of the priests who draw near to me must first rid themselves of any impurity so that I do not break loose and kill them." Moses said to God, "No one can approach Mount Sinai because you warned them when you said, set up boundaries around the mountain to keep the area holy and separate. Go back down and bring Aaron with you next time, but do not let any of the people, including priests, to cross those boundaries to come up and meet me, unless they want me to break loose and kill them." And so Moses went back down and told the people what all the Eternal had said. Now, God began to speak directly to all the people. Now, this is a big moment because God has only spoken through Moses and Aaron on his behalf. But here, he turns directly to them to address the covenant. This shows the importance that God himself talks to his people. Not just to Moses. He doesn't just talk to a representative. Instead, he talks to all of them.
to express the core of his obligations of the covenant. So he begins by reminding them of all that he has done, and then begins the long, long line of 613 commandments that they are to keep.
I am the Eternal, your God. I led you out of Egypt and liberated you from lives of slavery and oppression. You are not to serve any other gods before me. You are not to make any other idols or image of other gods. In fact, you are not to make an image of anything in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters beneath. You are not to bow down and serve any image, for I, the Eternal, your God, am a jealous God. As for those who are not loyal to me, their children will endure the consequences of their sins for 3 or 4 generations. But for those who love me and keep my directives, their children will experience my loyal love for 1,000 generations. You are not to use my name for your own idle purposes, for the Eternal will punish anyone who treats his name as anything less than sacred. You and your family are to remember the Sabbath day, set it apart and keep it holy. You have 6 days to do all your work, but the 7th day is to be different. It is the Sabbath of the Eternal, your God. Keep it holy by not doing any work, not you, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, or any outsiders living among you. The Eternal made the heavens above and the earth below, the seas and all the creatures in them in 6 days. Then on the 7th day he rested. That is why he blessed you. He blessed the Sabbath day and made it sacred. You are to honor your father and your mother. If you do, you and your children will live long and well in the land the Eternal, your God, has promised you. You are not to murder. You are not to commit adultery. You are not to take what is not yours. You are not to give false testimony against your neighbor. You are not to covet what your neighbor has set your heart on, getting his house, his wife, his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. As all the people witnessed the signs of God's presence, the blast of the ram's horn, the roaring thunder, the flashing lightning, and the smoke-covered mountain, they shook with fear and astonishment and wisely kept their distance. The Israelites said to Moses, "We are afraid to have God speak directly to us. We're certain that we will die. You speak to us instead, and we promise to listen." Moses said to them, "Don't be afraid. These powerful manifestations are God's way of instilling awe and fear in you so that you will not sin. He is testing you for your own good." But everyone remained far away from the mountain as Moses began moving toward the thick, dark cloud where God was. The Eternal One said to Moses, "This is what I want you to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have witnessed that I have spoken to you from heaven. It is essential that you do not make any idols to rival me. Do not make any idols out of silver or gold for yourselves. Take earth and build an altar to me and sacrifice all of your burnt offerings and peace offerings there. Offer me the best of your sheep and oxen. Wherever I choose for my name to be remembered, I will come to you and shower blessings upon you. Also, apparently I am very late in time, so I guess I literally just have to end it now. So I guess I'm going to have to make this a 3-parter instead. Why am I still doing this voice? I have absolutely no idea." All right, so brothers and sisters, unfortunately I have to cut it short because I can't go for 3 hours onward. I would, by the way. Trust me. I would if I could. But I have a time restriction, so I guess I have to divide this into 3 parts now, which, oh, that's going to be fun. But my brothers and sisters, that's unfortunately all for today. I would go on for hours and hours if I could, but of course, I've got limits. My vocal cords can only take so much. So, my brothers and sisters, unfortunately, I'll have to end it here. I'll pick up on the rest of the laws tomorrow. Not tomorrow, sorry. Not tomorrow. On Friday, I'll continue on with the laws given on Mount Sinai, the construction of the tabernacle, and the 40 years they spent in the wilderness. We'll end it around the time of Joshua, and then continue with Judges. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, my brothers and sisters, may the Lord God bless you. May He protect you, and may He keep you. And may you all have a wonderful morning, or evening, or day, or night. We shout out Yvette Fortune and Ruben Echeverria. I probably screwed up both of those names. But we shout out to them for leaving comments on this preaching. And may the Lord bless you all, and may you have an incredible day or night, or you get my point. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Peace be with you.
Hermanos, hermanas, gracias por habernos acompañado. Recuerde que estamos transmitiendo desde Pandel, California. llegando hasta donde usted en este momento tenga un dispositivo, nos esté acompañando y esté ayudándonos a compartir este evangelio. Damos gracias y, como siempre, un saludo para todos y cada uno de ustedes. Bienvenidos a seguir escuchando y seguir viendo este canal de Radio Liberación Evangélica. Un shalom para todos y cada uno de ustedes. Vamos a una pausa. Regresamos con más en vivo, con más personas que nos acompañan el día de hoy llevando el evangelio para usted. Bendiciones.